Do you feel like your rock drawings look too similar? Are they too simple and you don't know how to create textures? Rocks look boring? Well, let's fix that. So in today's video we will be talking about stones. I hope you find this how-to art lesson helpful. I saw you really like the way I explain art-related topics, so I thought I'd make some more art guide videos. I hope this tutorial helps you learn something new and useful. What I found most difficult about these stones was their variety and shapes. My rocks were almost always blurry texture, maybe with some additional stretches, but it looked unnatural and boring to me, too much boring. Before making this video, I did some research and found a way to make the stones more alive. How ironic is that? And in this video I'd like to share my thoughts with you. Hope it will help you too. The most important in learning is to understand how things work. So let's start with exploring the key concepts and logic of drawing rocks and stones. And the first will be simplification. It's really simple, you know? I heard a lot of people struggle with shaping a lot, and my solution was to start simple. Simple geometry. Only after that, I move on to complexing the object, adding new shapes, cutting, beveling, detailing, etc. It is always just random shape, sharp or more rounded, cubic or spherical, etc. Then I continue to improvise and add more smaller shapes. This helps to add variety. I know it's really exciting to go and make all these cool shadings, textures and scratches, but without general shape, it's always much more difficult to manage all of the small details. And my advice here is try to follow the general personality of your stones. I'm trying to make the shape more dynamic and diagonal, or just try to keep a certain angle and logic of forms so that the stone looks more cohesive. The shape language is my second key concept. Designing a rock is similar to designing a character. A stone can evoke different emotions with its shape. This is called the shape language, and it's just a way to tell a story and add personality to an object or character through its appearance. If you want to get a more natural look, it is very important to make the stones asymmetrical. I can recommend just practicing this until you are happy with the shapes you create. This is the part where the shape takes on volume and begins to appear more three-dimensional. So I guess it's kinda important. First, I determine where the light is and divide the object into two surfaces, illuminated and shaded. Then add an ambient occlusion and light fall-off. I usually just make a gradient from one side to another, like from top to bottom. But remember, light fall-off is much less noticeable when the light source is far away, like the sun, for example. And this is all because of the square law. And the final step is some reflexes. The lighting itself might be a whole another video. Let me know if you'd like me to explain more about ambient occlusion and fall-off. It is not exactly about rocks, but still related to them. You can use stones to build interesting composition. I guess there are infinite possibilities on how you can use boulders and rocks to create a composition, but here's an example. You can create lines to lead the viewer to the point you would like, and boulders can play a role of these lines. It works with any objects in the scene really, but rocks are just an example. I encourage you to look for other works of art and try to answer this question. What does look so important? Why does it look so important? It is just one example surely, but there are a lot of composition rules actually. I'm going to cover some of them in one of my future videos. The part we all waiting for. I guess it's just one of the most interesting parts here. Rocks are just a bunch of different materials mixed together, and I think it's an interesting idea to make the stone texture itself more varied and partial. but not always. Rocks are different, you know. You can do this by adding different tones or stains, making its texture more hard and rough. But some stones can be simpler and softer, so consider your idea first. The cool thing about stones is that you can make them completely different. It can be overwhelming, but as long as you remember the drawing keys, it would seem rather like an opportunity. You're able to use rocks in so many scenes in reality. Now I'll quickly show you how I draw rocks. Maybe it could give you some ideas for your own technique. Usually, I begin by defining the basic forms by some quick straight lines, or just create a silhouette with the lasso. I like to think of the rocks as of some piece that I cut off gradually from the sides. Then I complicate the general shape by adding more and more different and smaller shapes to the object. Next, I color and shade it. I also like to do this with a lasso. It is fast and the result is always unexpected, but looks natural to me. The first step to shading is simply to separate the lighted and shaded surfaces. After that, I add more shades grabbed by value and dot reflexes. In the rendering phase, I look for references if I need some exact textures, but in general I try to add more and more complex shapes and textures to the simple ones I created at the beginning and add in some stretches. If you don't even know about the shape you would like to start with, try to look for the references. Stones have a lot of variety, as I said earlier. There's like more than 5,000 kinds of stones? What? And surely everyone is unique in its own way. With references you will be able to see what stones are there and how can their textures and forms vary. By gathering the visual information you will be able to better understand how to make more natural shapes. But don't forget to experiment and try to not copy them, but change in some ways. Add some spices, that to say. By the way, I didn't know where to include it, but I guess it's interesting enough. Consider that rocks by the water in general more smooth because of the water affecting it. By making it smooth, you make it more soft and pleasant, but spiky rocks look more ominous and dangerous. Well, we discussed the rocks from the artist's point of view, but I guess it could be helpful to understand their geology as well. I see this as a rock's anatomy and it helps me to understand its texture better. Also, when it comes to drawing rocks without references or using them in compositions, it helps me to imagine it easily. There are surely a lot of different kinds and types of stones, and you can easily get confused with such a variety of shapes and textures. Even I did for so many years. But I'm going to tell the basics, which can help you to understand the logic of the shape information. Just saying, here are time steps for those who don't want to listen about geology and just want to get to the exercises. From my own research, I have learned that there are three main types of stones: sedimentary, metamorphic and igneous. All you need to understand is they are formed so... Okay, I swear it won't be long. Sedimentary types formed from different pieces of pre-existing stones or organics. Such stones generally form on the surface with the help of water and weather. For example, you can see limestones, slates, clay, etc. I don't know. Igneous are formed by heat and pressure underground. Metamorphic are stones that were igneous or sedimentary first, but were changed due to, once again, heat and pressure. It's also changing deep underground. In reality, all these stones are pretty similar, but this is if we are talking about their chemical composition. But thanks to the different environments and conditions, they change drastically. Once ordinary boulder is once gemstone, that's to say. I think most of the rocks that are formed with pressure and heat are quite stronger than the sedimentaries. They become more dense and pure, their crystal lattice is stronger too. This is in general and in basic, of course. Stones are much more variable. I'm not a geologist and I'm explaining this just to give better understanding of the visual part of rocks and their appearing. So if you have better geology or geography knowledge, feel free to share in the comments. I will be glad to learn about it a little more. In this section, I'd like to tell about exercises I made on preparation for this video. I guess this could help your practice and process too. First of all, start simple if you are struggling. Make some drawings of different rocks, boulders using references with different shapes, textures, etc. When you will be confident enough with understanding the shape, try to implement the acquired skills and knowledge in the environment sketches. Forests with boulders, rivers, rocky beaches, mountains, whatever. More variety, more visual understanding. And the final step is to try more complex forms. For example, a rock statue. I saw great exercise out here. Make one object with different materials. You can try it as well. But the most important, try to experiment and don't just copy the references. It is likely would be difficult at first, so I'd recommend to get used to this material first by gaining visual library. But once you kinda easily understand it, try to create your own stones. Or ask yourself when using references, how can I make it look more interesting? How can I spice it up? And that's it. I hope you found this video helpful. If you enjoy this art tutorial, don't forget to leave a like. Also, I highly recommend you to subscribe if you do so, because I'll post more how-to lessons here. If you didn't see my previous guide, you can check it out now to advance your understanding of natural environment. I also thought about including gems here, but this topic deserves separate video in my opinion. Would you like to see a video about gemstones in the future? Let me know in the comments. And now I wish you luck in your learning and practice. See you later!